Carl Talton, Part 2. Carl shares pivotal moments from his career and community involvement, emphasizing the importance of economic development, political activism, and community empowerment. His insights into the impact of gentrification on Portland's Black community and his efforts with North-Northeast Economic Development Alliance provide valuable lessons on strategic planning and community preservation.
I think about gentrification a lot. You know, when we did the North-Northeast Economic Development Alliance thing I was talking about, and this issue of gentrification came up, and it did come up. Someone said, well, you know, will this add to gentrification in the community? The answer was, well, yes, it will. So what does that mean for us? Well, what that means is more businesses, more jobs, more economics in the community, and so forth. What's the downside of it? People being moved out due to housing or whatever other issues, you know, may come along. That's why you need to have a comprehensive plan, which we had. We had a very comprehensive plan. We had, for instance, the program that we led with at the Alliance was the Northeast Community Development, Northeast Economic, NECDC, Northeast Community Development Corporation. So that organization was the first corporation west of the Mississippi to pull down a major grant to do housing in a community with scattered site housing. In fact, it was the only one for many years to be able to do it. That was in Portland. That was the Alliance and the NECDC. So that the reason for that was to take advantage of all the other dynamics that we thought we were generating with gentrification. Gentrification simply means you're now moving. It's come to mean in people's minds a lot of different things. But what it means is now you've got this group called gentry that are now present and impacting their community. Well, the whole idea was that those people that were doing that were us. That was us. We're doing this. We're improving our lot. We're improving our home ownership opportunities. We're improving our business development opportunities. We're improving the jobs. That was another part of the key base of what we wanted to do. How do we want to stabilize the community? Well, financially and economically, you want to have jobs. That's kind of your first thing. Then you want some ownership. You want some people that own businesses. Yeah, and then you want people who own houses. That's usually your best financial investment early on. We had very little of that at that time. And then just land ownership. So those are the four kind of pillars of things that we wanted to say. And if you do that, you're going to control the gentrification in your neighborhood. We to answer your question about how much does politics and government affairs and those things impact that, I think it'll impact it a lot. Now, whether it impacts it for good or not is how it gets managed. And let me just talk about our experience there. We knew that we had something special going on. We knew that we had lots of money for housing. We knew we had other kinds of political assets that were operating in our favor and so on and so forth. And I don't want to say we got the big head, but if I think back on it, I think that's what it was. I think what we thought was, we got this. You know, we got the politics under control. We got the money control. We got housing set out. We got new businesses. Oh, yeah, we got this going on. But there was a disconnect somewhere, and I'm not sure how it happened. We brought a woman down from Seattle, a woman by the name of Jackie Walker, and Jackie was the executive director of the Northeast Community Development Corporation. And Jackie was a go-getter. I'm telling you. Jackie went after it. She came in after we got the financing, the grants, and so forth to do this. But she breathed life into it. Jackie went to every neighborhood in Northeast, went to every church. She had billboards throughout Northeast Portland. Went to every community meeting there was, and her message was this: look, we are going to turn this community around. Homeownership is what we're going to do. This is a homeownership by black people in this community, for black people in this community, and we're here to prepare you for that homeownership. If you're paying rent or something, we guarantee you can move into a home paying, in many cases, less than what you're paying for rent. No, we'll give you the down payment, and we'll get your taxes deferred for, I think it was 7 years. And then you move in with some equity in that home, anywhere from just a few thousand up to $20,000 worth of equity you move into. She put classes together to teach people about homeownership so that they knew at the end of 7 years, when you started having to pay taxes and so forth, here are the maintenance kinds of issues as a homeowner that you're going to have, so you need to be prepared to pay for those things. But in the meantime, you got a brand new house, no maintenance issues, and no taxes, and some equity. So in 7 years, you should be straight, right? I can't tell you. I don't know the exact number, but let me just say it this way. So at that time, we were looking at 200 units, and that's what the grant was for, 200 units in Northeast. The communities that we would go into, Jackie would go in, she'd walk those neighborhoods, and the houses that were in that neighborhood that were somewhat dilapidated or needed work, she'd go to that homeowner and say, look, we're going to build a couple of houses here, one here and one over here in this neighborhood, and we see it looks like maybe you need some attention to your roof, house needs to be painted, you need some work on your porch. I'll send the crew over here and we'll do it. So when we come in here, when we move in here, when we pull these houses in here, you're not going to be able to distinguish our house from any other house in this neighborhood, because we want every house in this neighborhood to look and be in good repair. That was the way Jackie did it, and she was very good at it. And free. They never had to pay for that, never had to pay for any of that. We all paid for it out of any CDC. But the bottom line is, how many people do you get taking advantage of the program? And we got very, very few. So instead of tools to stave off that outside influence of gentrification, all we did was end up putting gasoline on the fire. Because now you got all these housing units, you got all these improvements going on in the neighborhood, nobody in the neighborhood taking advantage of them. So when I look back on it and I see what it is, that's what I see. Now, why there was that disconnect, I don't know, because every community, remember, these folks were all a member of the Alliance. All of these decisions were made around the table with all of these people sitting there. They all had constituencies in the community, made up of renters and other social service agencies and so on and so forth. Why that disconnect was made, to this day, I don't know. But when I think about challenges, when I think about the challenge today of what's going on with, what's the name of the project, with AV, Albina Vision, and so forth, that's my only worry. I don't have any doubt. They got a bunch of smart people over there. My daughter's one of them. They really good stuff. We have a bunch of smart people too. We have a bunch of smart people, well placed, which is maybe an advantage that we have over them because they don't have now. But my concern is, how do you engage the population in a way that they're able to really get into this vision that you've established and all this stuff? The only The advantage that I think they do have is that they're going about this much slower than we did. We went from 0 to 100 overnight. I mean, one day, nobody ever heard of us, knew who we were. The next day, everything, the city would dance. It was just about dancing to our tune, doing what we wanted, so on and so forth. And just a lot of clout and a lot of presence in the community. They are not quite, they don't quite, from what I see, and I'm not actively engaged these days, and so I'm not sure that what I see is all that accurate. But I don't see that level of engagement with them. And I don't know how, you get beyond that. I just don't know. I don't know how you get beyond that. And of course now too, the community is so much more dispersed than it was then. You know, those days we all pretty much lived in North Bay. Now we're the Numbers and Beaverton and Vancouver, and we still kind of consider ourselves a community, but we're geographically we're spread out much more. So I think the challenge in that respect is bigger than the one that we had, but it points out the one failing that we had that they might be even more susceptible to, but I'm hoping that they don't. I tell this to my daughter on a regular basis, is that y'all think about this. Y'all are young, you got these bright minds, you're full of energy, you're really smart people and so forth. Just think about how you get engaged with the people you really need to be engaged with to make sure that this thing comes about. So if anybody can figure it out, I'm sure it's them. I'm sure that if it can, they'll do it. But it's going to be a challenge, because it's not just about getting money or getting this or getting that. But I have been very impressed with what they've been able to do so far, and anticipate they'll have some level of success. What that success will look like, or how big it will be, I don't know. I've been so one of the things, I don't know if you saw or not, but so I spent a number of years on the Portland Development Commission. So I was chairman of the Portland Development Commission for a number of years. So in terms of urban renewal and all of that, I'm familiar with that. In looking at that experience and knowing the capabilities that that organization had at that time and the capabilities that they have today, it paints in my mind a more daunting picture of what's happening in Portland and what's going to happen in Portland. In those days, the Portland Development Commission was a separate agency from the city of Portland. Hired its own people, had its own executive directors, had its own pretty much everything. The city, so like the Northeast Committee and the Alliance, PDC was not the best friend of City Council. You would think they should have worked very closely together or should have thought highly of each other, but that's not the way it works out. City Council always felt that they ought to be setting the directions on things and so forth, and that PDC should do whatever they wanted them to do, and PDC had a different ideas. In fact, you asked the question about economics and so on and so forth. And so when you look at the agenda of the City Council and the Portland Development Commission, probably that difference is the view of economics and how important economics were in the survivability of the city and in the communities that it served. And City Council's vision was different than that. They were more on the social side than they were on the economic side. So you never had, but they made a good balance. In my mind, they made a good balance for each other. Because if they all went one way or all went the other, then we would have issues regardless of which side that you went to. But that was the difference I saw then. And now, everything's pretty much run by City Council. The City Council is even more liberal than it was back in those days. The last few years, I served as the chairman of the Portland Development Commission. I think I spent more time at PDC than I did in my own office because of the internal issues between the city council and the Portland Development Commission. They were never ending. There was always something brewing all the time. PDC was able to last as long as it did because it gets no funding. Then it got no funding from the city. I'm not sure how they're doing their funding now. But PDC didn't get its funding from the city, so it didn't feel any particular allegiance to have to do what city council wanted them to do. I'd never sat very well with city council, and they were always looking for opportunities to kind of bring PDC more under the purview. Well, that's finally happened now with this new structure that they have. What's the name of it? The Portland Progress, something like that. So that's it's a different situation. It's an organization that I spent 15 years of my life with, and have nothing. I have really good things to say about it. I do have some bad things to say about it, even when I was there. But for the most part, there were a group of highly, highly professional people who were very good at their work, and were very effective. And City of Portland looked today. I would have said 10 years ago, Portland looks today because the way it looks because of the Portland Development Commission. Well, it's not looking very good today. We're not seeing as much development. We're seeing more things closing down. We're seeing the economics of the city deteriorate pretty rapidly. And those were all things that the PDC was actively engaged in. But and I think that I had talked about the energy business a little bit. I might go to that just for a minute because right at the end of my days at PDC was when I kind of went from Pacific Power to Portland General Electric. So I went over to PDE. I served several years there as their Vice President of Government Affairs, Business Development, Economic and Community Development. So, and this was at the time when Enron had bought them and took over. So I ended up lobbying in Washington, D.C., not just for PDE, but for Enron as well. So I spent a fair amount of time in Houston with Enron. And then I spent a fair amount of time in Washington, D.C., lobbying on behalf of Enron or the electric utility in general. So that was one of the less pleasurable experiences I've ever had. I would love to say I enjoyed my time there. I can't say that I did. They were good people. They had a woman over there who was CEO, Peggy Fowler. Peggy Fowler was great. She kind of grew up from inside the organization. She was very good. The culture of the company, though, was very different from Pacific Power. Pacific was, particularly in those days, was a very aggressive. I won't say aggressive, I'll say assertive. They were a very assertive organization. They didn't look to go after things, to take on things, but anything that would tend to threaten their opportunity for success as a business or a utility was something that they would go after. So that was a culture that I was raised in. I mean, when I went to lobbying for Pacific, that was my culture. Win. You got to get in there. You got to win. Somebody said it the other night on some kind of program. I can't remember what it was, but he said, "Well, they, we have to, every time this comes around, we have to win. We have to win. We have to win. They only have to win once." Well, that's the way it is when you're lobbying and so forth. And you see the same set of bills, year after year after year, that are all geared towards diminishing your business or taking you down, and attacking you in some way. And so you end up with a whole new set of legislators, a whole new set of bills, and every legislative session you've got to try to beat back the ones that are a detriment to your organization, and you only have to lose once. If you lose once, then you have lost a substantial amount of business or business opportunity for the organization. And they come at you. I mean, you'll have a legislative session where you'll have, in those days, it was about 1,000 bills in the House and maybe 500 or 600 in the Senate, as I recall. So 1,600 bills a session. And easily 100 of those would be directly focused on the utility industry. So that's 100 different bills that you've got to manage and follow through and try to work through. So you take on a fairly assertive, aggressive role. I was one of the best breaks that I had in my life was around that. There was two things that happened to me, maybe three. The first one was the guy that I told you that came and got me back from the county and so forth, and sent me down to Salem. I have to step back and think about that guy, Jack McIsaac. If I were, and I have to ask myself the question, if I were him and I were in his shoes, would I have made the same decision about me? I mean, I have to ask that question. The politics of the utility industry are so sensitive and so key to their continuing to operate and so forth. And you know that you're going to have, even though the very top guys who support you are going to be there, you're still going to have an element in the organization that's going to be uncomfortable with you being there. Not only that, you're going to be the first, which I was, the first black lobbyist for a major corporation in the state of Oregon, the first one. So you're going to end up going down, and you've got that set of issues. You got other lobbyists who are there. Some are operating for you, some are operating against you. You've got a set of legislators down there, most of which are unknown, but they tend to have more conservative values, which tends to suggest that they might not be as accepting, which is the problem that the upper guys have of a black person, particularly on these highly sensitive, very impactful pieces of legislation coming. So if I was the guy who made the decision as to who goes down and take care of that, and it was a guy that was a little bit out of the ordinary, that man, I honestly, man, when I step back and I think about it myself, I say, Carl, would you have been bold enough, brave enough to make that decision and do that? Even it doesn't matter that it was the right thing to do. Would you really have had the nerve to do that? And I don't know that I would have. As it turned out to be a great thing to have happen. I had an extremely successful session down there. I ended up establishing a great reputation during that session. And so by the time I left and passed it on, Pacific was in great political standing, not just because of my effort. I had predecessors down there who had laid out a roadmap. It was a rough roadmap, but it was there. But I had to stay on it. I had to follow it, and I had to do what a utility lobbyist does, and I did, and that was the way it went. It was good. So the other insight to the politics was an eye-opening experience for me. So most people kind of suspect this, but they don't really know how they operate. So there are always these small groups that control a lot of larger groups. So in those days in Oregon, there's a group that was made up of banks, utilities, timber industry, transportation, trucking, and who was the other one? There was really no Intel, no tech industry to speak of in those days. Intel was not Intel, but Tektronix was big, and they were doing a lot of stuff, but they were not politically engaged at all. So that group would they all had their own political action committees, their own PACs. They raised money and so forth, and they would meet, and we'd meet downtown either at the Arlington Club or the University Club, and we would talk about the strategies for the upcoming session. We would talk about campaigns, money, where we were putting money, where we weren't putting money, and we would cover every district in the state. So I'm sitting around this table. Most people don't even know exists. A lot of money at this table. They have money, and then they control money. And that was the other thing to understand about the political game is you don't necessarily have to have the money, but you have to be able to control the money. So we're sitting around the table, and as we get to every district, there's kind of a general assessment of it, and so on and so forth. So then we get to the Northeast Portland district. And it's a joke. It's a joke. It is, nobody takes the district seriously because they know that what they're going to end up with is some way out person who is not really engaged in the political process, but is there to make statements about this or that or whatever. And I'm sitting there. And so there are a couple of things that occur to me. One is I already know the only reason that I'm sitting at that table is because I represent, which was at that time, probably the most powerful company in the state. They had more political connections than anybody else in the state. So that's why I'm there, because that's who I represent. And the reason... and I'm a black man sitting there. So the only reason I'm sitting there is that. If it was just me trying to bring my own personal political clout to the table, it wouldn't happen. And that was an uncomfortable feeling for me, because when I looked around the table, I saw guys who had the clout of their organizations, behind them. They all also had personal clout. I said, well, I don't have that. I need a little bit of that. So I started a PAC. It's called Bob PAC, Black Oregonians for Business Political Action Committee. And I recruited 10 people to be on that PAC, and I thought I was going to have to go through a whole lot of people to convince 10 people that this is something they should be doing. But I was pleasantly surprised. The first 10 people that I talked to said, hey, man, I'm in, And so, but most of them were not, here's the sales pitch that I used. I said, look, some of us we own our own businesses. Some of us, work for major corporations. Some of us have jobs that put us kind of in the public purview and so forth. At some point in time, it's going to the politics of a situation are going to be important to our success and our rise and whatever our career path is. So we need to have a political base with legitimacy to it. So when people see us, they don't just see us, they see that political base as well. And man, these guys, I said no, they're all smart people. They knew it, so they all jumped in right away. They all ponied up, I don't know, it was a couple $100, something like that, a piece, which we do that a year. So we ended up with a few $1,000. But, I had, George Richardson, who unfortunately has passed. And George was, I think, an accountant at the gas company, and then he ultimately became a lobbyist himself. And I think part of it was because he had this experience. Robert Butler, Travel Roberts, if you remember the Travel Roberts agency, used to be around. There was a Baldwin sanitary. She owned Baldwin, the trucks around town, all over. Answer Haggerty. Answer eventually became a federal judge. Who else was in there? Sandra Lowe. So Sandra was with Tektronix, and she was, I believe, the highest, one of the top officials at Tektronix before they moved out of here and went to Arizona somewhere. So anyway, we were all good people, 10, all the way from small business owners all the way up to folks that were gunning corporations. So, sitting around the table, I talked with them about the money, and they were unsure that they were going to be able to really impact things. And I told them what I just said to you. Look, we don't have to have a lot of money. We have to have some money, and we need to establish ourselves. And the first thing we need to do is establish home base, And I told them a story about me sitting around the table and so on and so forth. And when they got to the Black District and so forth, that how I felt about the conversation that happened around that table. And so what we needed to do was to change that. So we'll pick, as a strategy, I said, look, we'll pick 2 districts. We'll pick, the first district we'll pick is our district. I realize most of us don't live in this district, but everybody sees this as our district. So it doesn't matter. So we need to get engaged in this race, and we need to win. We need to win. So we did. We put a lot of money in that campaign. We put more money into that campaign than had ever, by far, had ever been put into that campaign. And then there was some expertise. They had their own energy. They had their own electoral folk, kind of working with election people and so forth. And they did a good job. But we paid them early on. We put that money in. We added expertise to them. We gave them credibility. And so people that they would reach out to, that we had access to, we made sure that access was completed. The second one that we picked was Tucson, Oregon. A guy by the name of Mike Thorne. And so these guys had never heard of Mike Thorne. Well, who's Mike? I said, well, okay, here's what you need to know about Mike Thorne. He's the most powerful legislator in the state of Oregon, and you've never heard of him. He's the chairman of Ways and Means. He's the chairman of Water Resources, which is a huge issue in Oregon. He's probably the largest rancher in the state, wheat rancher in the state of Oregon. We had a couple other guys who actually ran horse ranches and so forth. He was a wheat rancher. And he's the most conservative legislator in the state of Oregon. So what we get is we kind of get both ends covered here. Mike is someone who is already willing to listen to us, even though you guys don't know him. He's a great legislator, tremendous influence, and it's somebody that we need to be associated with, and kind of somebody whose coattail that we can grab onto and work it pretty easily. And that is going to allow us to kind of move along and grow the organization. They said, well, how do we get this money? I said, well, okay, so and I told them about the table, and I said, they have money, but then they control other money. So what we want to do is control the controllers. So if we can control these guys and get them to do what we want them to do, they're going to control those other packs. And that's where all that money's going to come from, because it's dependent upon us to raise and put all the money into the campaign. It's not going to work. So they thought they were not too sure about this at first because they somehow thought, well, I don't know, man. This is, white folks might get involved. And I said, well, yeah, they're already involved. But we control this. We decide what we're going to do. And so we did. So after we went through at least one round of that, and they could see how they operate, boy, you could really see the light come on for all of it. And these were not dumb people. I mean, these are lawyers and business owners and professional people. I mean, these are some sharp cookies. But it's the education piece that you spoke of before. They just hadn't been educated in this way about the political process and how it works. So you gotta know what it is, how it works, and make sure that you use it in such a way that it helps you with your ultimate goal and so forth. So we did. So that was kind of my third important experience, I think, with kind of the whole political process and how it operated and so forth. And I finally we had a huge issue at the national level around investor-owned utilities and so forth. And so it was in Washington, D.C., and I think I was sitting in Salem, and my boss called me and said, I need you to go to Washington, D.C. The top utilities in the country are going to be there. We're going to have a contingency there from Oregon. He said, but the American... was Edison, like, it was, God, I can't remember the name, but they're the ones who did all the major lobbying for the utilities, investor-owned utilities in the country. He said they need some help. He said, get back here and see what you can do. So I did. I went back, worked with them through this particular issue. We were able to get it resolved, and I know soon I got back to Portland, then they wanted me to come out full time to Washington, D.C. and do it. And my kids were really small at the time, and I had already spent a lot of time away from them in Salem, and I didn't want to now even spend more time because I'm either Washington, D.C. or uproot them and take them to Washington, D.C. A community of people that I was really unfamiliar with and so forth at their age. That was not a price that I wanted them to pay, so I didn't go. But it did garner me a pretty good reputation in terms of the utility business, lobbying, and kind of all those pieces came together. So then that takes me to my last 20 years or so. So I was at Portland General. That's it. I really wasn't all that enthused about that experience there. But I left and retired actually, and started work for, I was on the board of this organization called Portland Family Funds. And Portland Family Funds was an entity that was put together by a guy by the name of Ed Jensen. Ed Jensen was the chairman of Visa International and U.S. Bank. And Ed, at the time, this is the beginning of kind of the downhill run for Portland. Portland was losing all of its banking institutions. A lot of these, First Interstate and U.S. Bank, all these companies used to be headquartered in Portland. So they all left. They all went to Minneapolis or wherever they ended up. And he said, we really need a financial institution here in Portland that, with all of the creative thinking, with the wherewithal to finance the kind of development that Portland is going to need to see long term. So we started this thing called Portland Family Funds. I was on the Portland Development Commission at the time, along with a guy by the name of Marty Brantley. And so we organized this inside PDC, but it was always meant to be an outside agency because the things that they were going to need to do, you couldn't do with a public agency. But the public agency needed this external partner to be able to do the things that they wanted to do. But there was no external partner, so they had to create their own. So that's how PFF came to be, Portland Family Funds. So the agency had its core, the PDC, and then once it got its feet under it a little bit and actually applied for some financing, they moved out and became a separate entity. So this was not a pleasant time in my life. We had the board of Portland Family Funds was a pretty substantial board. So Ed Jensen was the chairman of that board, and then we had the guy who was the managing partner of Arthur Anderson, and then we had the head of the major development companies in Oregon. We had a couple of, not Czech, but there was another company whose name's escaped me. But anyway, it was a substantial board. And so I was on that board. I was probably, and all the other people on the board were really high finance people. I was more, again, kind of a political guy. And the people never understood what this, no, I'm talking about people in general, never really understood what the Portland Family Funds was about, what it was supposed to be. People had two opinions. One was that, oh, this should be under PDC, and the other one was, oh, these people are too close to PDC. So we got a lot of press around that, and we spent a lot of time on the front page of Willamette Week, Oregonian, and so on and so forth. And it got to be pretty unbearable. So I got a call from a subset of the board one day. It took me a lunch. We went right over to, what's the name of it up there? Cadillac Cafe. We were right there at the Cadillac Cafe. And they said, look, this is a world that we're not comfortable with and we're not in. We're all financial people. And when we look around at the rest of the board, we only see one person who is comfortable in this environment, and that's you. So we're pretty much ready to quit because every day on the front page of Willamette Week, the Oregonian, all these days questioning our veracity, or this, or that. And when we all joined this because we thought we were doing a good thing for Portland. And so we're not interested because nobody here is making money on this. This is about doing what needs to be done to keep Portland viable and a player in the economics of the country. They said, so we're ready to quit, but we will stay if you will take over the organization as the chief executive of the board. And the CEO of the organization reports to you. And so you will oversee the daily operations of the company, and you'll be the face of the organization to the city, to whoever, whoever it is, the reporters, you're the political face that everyone has to work through. And the CEO reports to you. And the CEO we had he was a brilliant guy from Texas. His personality, his mannerisms, and so forth just didn't play well in Portland. So he kind of created maybe some enemies that he didn't really need to, mostly because of that, just his persona. His persona was very different. And that's what people saw and made decisions on, as opposed to, he was a brilliant guy, something this, that, and the other. So he did. So I came in, I did that. And so I became the interface with all of this. And then I became the guy who was always on the front page of this or that, the Oregonian, Willamette Week, or whatever, because people didn't understand the financial mechanism that was in place for this organization. I think it was the Willamette Week. They took out a full page, the center page, where you've got both sides of that. And what they had done is they had laid out one of the deals that we had done, money from here, from there, to this, that, and this other thing, and so forth. And then the big caption underneath was, does anyone understand this? So the idea was, these guys are playing a shell game, this and that, and so on and so forth. So we had a difficult time doing deals in Portland, so we started doing deals in other places, Los Angeles, New York, Boston. And then all of a sudden, a developer comes to the city and says, wait a minute, here are these projects that are going on in these places, and they're being done by this group in Portland. He said, why can't we? So that was the beginning of local political pressure to say, look, let's try to do something with them. So we ended up doing some initial projects in Portland. We did about 10 of them initially. The Oregon Medical Center, what we call 12W, which is down on 12th and Washington. It's a high-rise down there. On Vanport Plaza, we did that, which was the first one of its type in the country. So as an organization, that put us on the map in the country because everybody else was doing the larger, easier deals. Nobody was doing a community-focused investment, that involved lots of small business owners, local employment, a real local focus in terms of building the economics of that community. Well, we focused on Vanport mostly because of my experience in that community and knowing that was a high priority for us. It was a high priority under the alliances, Vision Peace, and even though the alliance was no longer out, it was still a primary focus for me because the goals around it were all still good and the same. So we did that. And so that worked. And then eventually we moved from Portland, we reorganized and became the United Fund Advisors, which is what we are today. So we do, we do stuff all over the country. I'm trying to think of the last deal we did, but it's not important. But United Fund Advisors is kind of unique. It's a small organization. It competes with all the major financial institutions in the country, Goldman Sachs and Wells Fargo and U.S. Bank. And, those are competitors. And not only are competitors, they're organizations that we also contract with because this is a very complicated program, and most of the large banks don't want to gear up to take care of the complexities. They can pull down the tax credits, and they can take care of the back of the financial side of things. But what they don't want to do is to have to gear up a full back room to kind of manage all this stuff. Just to give you an idea of how complex it is. So when you do one of these deals involving the market tax credits for 7 years, you have to report on everything about this deal. It's viable, it's making money, how many people is it employed, its impact, it's what's called a community impact statement. So every year you have to do that for 7 years. It has to turn a profit. That business that you put that money into has to turn a profit. And then at the end of 7 years, you kind of dissolve the deal. And then the way that the investor makes the money is that these are tax credits. And so a certain percentage of those tax credits are awarded back to these investors over that 7-year period until they get back to the full value of what they're investing in. So it's a unique process. So I'm still kind of engaged a little bit with them. I chair the National Community Fund, what they call the managing director of that. And the National Community Fund is the agency that actually takes down the tax credits that these guys use to finance these projects and so forth. We have a national board These are all guys that I met in the process. Most of them are brothers. There's a sister out of Dallas, Texas, a brother out of Atlanta, another brother out of Louisville, Kentucky, brother out of New York, one local. Ronnie is on that board, so I had to have Ronnie. So Ronnie's there, and then the rest of them are guys. We got a couple of women, one, and I think she's in San Francisco, and one in New York. So anyway, so we've got a board. It's a national board, and we just met the other day. We meet a couple of times a year by phone. We haven't been together in the same room for at least 10 years. At least 10 years. But most of them are all people that I've met, that I had some relationship with. We did something together at some point on our project, and I had confidence in them. And so when we put together this new board, that's what we did. We pulled those people in. And so they're all really, really good people.
Sounds amazing. Yeah. Let me ask you.
Yeah.
Is there a quote that you kind of kept close to your heart throughout the journey of life? Old force.
No, I think the closest I can come to something like that is what I started out with. I can't remember if we said this on camera, if it was part of our preliminary conversation, but the lens, making sure. So it's important for people to have a worldview that they understand. So one of the first things that I learned after seeing in the political process, I used to be of the mindset that if you get a couple of reasonably intelligent people that disagree on something, if you give them all the same information and so forth, that you will essentially resolve it. You'll come to the same conclusion. Nothing could be farther from the truth. I operated like that early on, and then eventually I come to understand that that's just not true. I'd like for it to be true, but it's not true. So it really comes down to a person's world view. And as I said, I think I operated with a particular view, even though I didn't really understand what it was or why it was. And then as I've gotten older and realized what it was, I realized that that's what it is. And that's the only thing that I would really pass along to someone, is to know what your worldview is. Most people can't tell you what their worldview is. They make decisions and they operate based on instincts or whatever sounds or looks good to them at the time. If you don't have a standard of truth, then you'll anybody can tell you anything and you'll be for it. So understand what your worldview is, and then everything else you measure based on that worldview. That's the lens that I look through when I see the world. It is that Christian worldview. And I never really think about it until I have a really difficult decision to make about something. In fact, I've got something going right now with some folks that I know in the work environment that they're in. And when I thought about this morning, I thought, I really need to start with that Christian worldview, and then talk with them and see how I might be able to help them through this particular issue. Because knowing and understanding your own worldview is, I'm not telling you what worldview you have to have, but you need to know what it is. You need to be able to articulate it and understand it and so forth, and know that that's how you're making decisions, is on that particular worldview. And now one day it's this, and the next day it's something else, and then the day after that it's something yet again. That's a very good question. I don't, and I guess it depends on how you define community. It's certainly not the black community that I grew up in or operated in for many, many years, which I would have defined as a geographically close-knit group of black people. Well, that really doesn't exist anymore. So now you're talking about a community of people that are not bound by geography, but by something else. Well, what is that something else? And that something else kind of depends on your worldview. So as a Christian, for me, that's the black church community. If I'm a black activist, it's maybe Black Lives Matter or some other black-oriented group. So, or if some other kind of activist, trans, whatever it is. That's your community. So understanding your worldview on that, I guess that is what you're doing. Like I said, everybody's got their own, but they need to understand what it is and why it is. Wow. There's a guy. If this guy's not on your list, it needs to be Baruti Arthur. Have you ever talked to Baruti Arthur? You know who he is? Oh, y'all need to know who Baruti is. Baruti, at one time he headed up housing at PDC. He headed up housing at the state housing. He was one of the owners of Coast Janitorial. Married into that family. I think they've since split. Baruti was an executive with Boise Cascade. Spent a lot of time here in Portland in their field. But anyway, I mention him because every time Baruti talks about me, and he tells people about me, there's something that he says that I really like. What he says. What he says is, he said, look, Carl is the only guy that I know that can comfortably walk either on the east side or the west side of Portland. And it doesn't make any difference. He has the same impact, the same presence, the same everything on either side of the river. And so I really like that. I appreciate that a lot. I don't know if there's anything else that anyone could say that I would feel better about, or certainly would agree with more. But and in fact, when I've described myself to some people, I've said, well, I'm the guy that, if I'm in the business community, they say, well, he's kind of one of us, but he's really a community guy. But he knows us, he understands what we need and so on and so forth, but he's really a community guy. If I'm in the community, they say, well, he's really a business guy. I mean, he knows us. He works well with us, but he's really a business guy. So that's kind of the mirror of that. And I would say that both of those are correct. So that's the way I like to be seen. A guy who had the ability to kind of move back and forth between any number of communities and so forth, and be effective and have a good presence in him. Well, it's as I talk about the albino vision, when I think about the pluses and minuses of between them and kind of the old alliance, one of the legs up that I think they have is there are more black entrepreneurs today. Think about yourself, There are more black folks like you out there than there ever have been. And I'm only going to say ever have been, because if I go back to beyond 1950, there were a lot of people like you. I mean, that's what most black people were. They had small businesses. They had every kind of shop, every kind of service, every kind of everything you can think of. And then we kind of lost all of that over time. So let me not go back more than, say, 50 or 60 years on it. But when we were doing the alliance, we didn't have that core of entrepreneurs. We had lost what had been there, and we hadn't grown yet to have what they have today. Now, the black entrepreneurs today, they are probably a little less visible, like yourself. In other words, they don't have grocery stores or barbershops or things, where the general public sees them. But they're tech-oriented people of some sort. And to me, that's a pretty good foundation to build on. But I think really honoring those folks and giving them a good platform really is to get the message out about what they're doing, how they're doing, and what's required to do it. Now, I say that understanding that the tech community in general tends not to be politically involved or motivated. I can go back to when I was at one of the vice president of government affairs at PGE. There was a group called the Oregon Entrepreneurial Forum, and they encourage small business development. They would have an event every year where all of the small business, same thing that Steve Wood, or Steve Green? Yeah. So the black, what's it called, that he does every year, not Black Venture, anyway, he does it, Pitch Black, thank you, where people come in and pitch their businesses. And Oregon Entrepreneurs Forum has been doing that for a number of years, and they had that going on for quite some time. So one of the board guys that I had done some other stuff with came to me and he said, "Look, we can't get the tech community engaged in politics." He said, "These guys need to be they are kind of the future of the state of Oregon. I mean, they're going to have more impact financially, economically than probably anybody else, but they're just not interested." He said, So would you come on to our board and kind of take on this charge of engaging that group of people? They're going to see someone like you as maybe being more, credible, because you're from the private sector. Because I think the way that they see this stuff is it's all kind of public sector oriented and so forth, and it's not something they want to be dealing with. So, and I talk about that story to simply point out that this is not just something with black community and black tech entrepreneurs. This is that general tech group for some reason. I don't know if it's the nature or the culture of what they do that tends to kind of generally make them that way or has made them that way in the past. But we, as a people, we need to break through on that and use that as a way to kind of really grow people's interest and so forth in entrepreneurs, how they work, how they operate, and understand the importance of this more capitalistic kind of venture and so forth as it moves forward. Always good to have a good social conscience. We need to do as much of it, but like I said, the undergirding of it always has to be economics. We need to understand what those economics are. We need to promote those economics. So that whole educational question that she had about economics comes very much into play here and how it ties back into the black community.
Thanks for tuning in to Oregon Hidden Legacy. For more information about this podcast, go to OregonHiddenLegacy.org.